starting, then all the words that I wondered about will come through. More words than we want, probably. Okay, let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow before you all. Divine Mother, great masters, help us to feel your inspiration flowing through us in all that we do. Help us to remember that the only way to happiness is to realize that that inspiration is the source and power in all that we do and in all that happens throughout the universe. Help us to also see with great clarity that we are one with all, and that only by celebrating that truth might we ever feel truly prosperous, truly at peace. Om Shanti. Amen. We'll have a chant and then a brief meditation.
From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt
This is such a simple chant in terms of using just a few words, but let's take these just few minutes in meditation, really bringing in and deep the words and the meaning. In joy, from joy I came, in joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. Very powerful, focusing on the true essence of our soul nature and of our very consciousness. And as we'll see as we look at the secret for tonight, just exactly what Swamiji is talking about, that the only way to ever feel truly prosperous is by tuning into the truth of these few simple words. So let's meditate on that and with that for just a few minutes now. Amen. Let's just listen to a little music before we move into the class.
There's joy in the heavens, a smile on the mountains, and melody sings everywhere. The clouds are is as free as the air. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air.
This life is such an extraordinary play. It's just, that was Krishna, right? It's distorted from this side. She just died a couple of days ago, but it's so interesting. You know, she called me on Saturday at about, I don't know what time it was. I was just getting ready to leave for the airport, and she wanted to talk to me about some choices in treatment, you know, because she was going to be undergoing radiation and then some oral chemo, but a lot of people were writing to her and saying, why don't you try this first? Why don't you try that first? The way Ananda goes, you know, take a little bit of this herb, go sit with this skull cap on that's going to send, you know, certain energy through your brain. Really, I mean it, there were like 4 or 5 suggestions. And we had this absolutely logical, reasonable, sane discussion. And then I said to her, you know, Krishna, I have a plane to catch. But I said, I can call you back tonight. And she said, oh no, it's fine. I'm sorry. I didn't know. She was her usual sweet self. And please give my love to Barry before you go. And then almost by the time I got to LA, she was gone. I mean, it's just such a play of energy. Then we just watch her singing, and I mean, it's so interesting and compelling. In this case, she's such a beautiful soul, but I was thinking about this when I was at home this afternoon trying to read about this secret, which I'll read to you in a minute. There was no way to grasp it to get readings. You'll see why. There's no word that you could pull up, like, what did Master Swamiji say about this? But, and yet I could feel the way Swamiji writes the secret. It's so meaningful to get it clear. It's the whole of the spiritual path. It's the whole reason we're here. I feel this with every secret, but I feel it tonight. And how elusive everything is. It just is. We think we're doing it all right. I mean, here we are, the people making the strongest effort, and yet you start reading about some of this stuff. It reminds me of, where was I just talking about this? When, I know, in a Sunday service a couple weeks ago about prayer, when Swamiji said to Krishna Das, well, why are you worried? You pray, don't you? And he said it to him intentionally, of course. I mean, Swamiji never said anything unintentionally. You pray, don't you? Krishna Das said to Swamiji, of course, I pray. And then for weeks, he went around saying to himself, I do pray, don't I? It's like suddenly you start asking yourself, what is prayer? Really, how focused do we need to be? What does it mean to be so in tune? And just how the whole of the spiritual path is like that. We're trying. And then all of a sudden, we think, have I done anything? You know, I mean, really, you look at a whole life and you think, wait a minute, did I make any progress in this life? It's sort of weird and interesting because it's just such a play of light and shadow. It's really like the first line of Samadhi, you know, banish the veil of light and shade. It's, you know, light and shade. It's just what makes everything. You can't really get a hold of it. The secret, for example, we're on our 18th secret, the secret of prosperity. Swamiji says, The secret of prosperity is realizing that one cannot truly prosper by the diminishment of others. Bless everyone. An expansion of self-identity is a mark of prosperity and also a condition for its attainment, which is really an interesting line. But basically, I mean, we can just say basically, what is he saying here? He's saying we don't actually get bigger in the way that we would want to be getting bigger, or better in the way that we would want to be getting better, by proving anybody else wrong or less about anything. And as I was reading this afternoon, I realized how easy it is. It's not like I'm walking around doing what other Master Swamiji said. I think Swamiji says in one of our readings on a Sunday, he said, you know, people try and make themselves look taller by cutting somebody else's head off. I mean, you literally make other people shorter, you feel bigger. That's what this is about. We don't do it like that. That's not what we're doing. We're not that aggressive. Any of us are that violent. But how often we can say to ourselves, well, I did that just as well. Or why didn't I get that opportunity? Or before we know it, in subtle ways, we're comparing ourselves to each other. It happens, and which is purely a function of the ego. And as soon as that's happening, then we're contractive. We're diminishing ourselves. That's not what it looks like in every instance. But as soon as we are comparing ourselves in any way, and it gets difficult when we think about our professional lives, or so many ways where we're even trying to gauge, sort of, we could say understandably, except it's not. But it would seem that it's understandable that we would be gauging ourselves by where other people are. It's sometimes part of how we think we even make ourselves try harder. It could look positive, but it never is, because each of us is so unique. We're each a unique and perfect manifestation of the divine that has nothing to do with where anybody else is. Nothing to do with it. And in fact, I mean, that's the subtlety of it. As soon as we think it does, then we're pulled into that, the delusion of ego. And it is constantly trying to do that. It's constantly that active force, an energetic, magnetic force, the ego, pulling us in rather than allowing us to expand. And I think at its best, I would say, it's a comment that Master had to make. I used to think that Satan was, what, do you remember it?
A manifestation of the mind.
Yeah, or something about other, not a manifestation of the mind. It's not fair that I called on you. I always look to you for these answers. But he said, not a manifestation of the mind, but a figment of people's imagination. But now I'm here to say, I know by my own experience that Satan is a real and living force. And of course, we go on to learn that Satan is as much a part of God as anything, because it's energy. It's exactly a manifestation of him, but this downward and inward pulling part of the energy. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's always there, and it's always acting on us. And it's just the degree of subtlety. So this reading is actually, when we read the word diminishment, which is an interesting word, how often do you don't even use that word really, diminishment. We say we diminish others, and I am always struck by words that have a lot of consonants or harsh feeling like that. They're always negative words in my mind. But he says that we would think, oh, we don't do that because it's too hard of a word. But we do that when we start comparing ourselves to others. We actually do, because there's a subtle way that, and I'm not saying we all do it equally or the same way, that's impossible, but we're looking at other people. There can be even that moment of excitement that we feel, or a little bit of, I would say joy, but joy is too good a word in this circumstance, when we see we're doing it better than somebody. So the way that we have of comparing ourselves, I have to say this because none of what we do is gross. We're not like that. We're not going to go out and be mean to people and be spreading nasty rumors about people or trying to trick them or put them down. But where are we, each of us, on our path? With what subtlety do we do that? Then he says, bless everyone. He's saying not just don't diminish them, but bless them, give them your blessing, means offer them the best of yourself. When we think of blessings, we actually think of something divine. And Swamiji's saying, offer that to people. And somewhere in here that I probably won't get back to, but Yogananda, in one of his way earlier teachings, talks about as soon as you feel that somebody's trying to hurt you, or you feel yourself reacting to being treated badly, how important it is to offer a blessing or to be putting out positive and good energy. You know, of course, this is what Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount that just blew all of his disciples away. They walked away saying, what is he talking about? Like if they slap you on one cheek, offer them the other. You know, nobody could make, it was such a new teaching in those days. It was so unlike what had been offered to people, where Jesus was trying to say, we're all a part of the same whole, and we will only ever find peace. He goes on in the sermon to offer the Beatitudes, actually, and where each of them shows us the blessing inherent in overcoming certain difficulties. You know, the 8 Beatitudes, which we'll be talking about this Saturday in this workshop. But it was so new to everybody. You know, what does that mean? Why would I be? Because what had been taught was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And then Jesus came along and said, that is completely wrong. And that is basically saying what we're looking at tonight. If you do that, you're stuck in the battle. If you enter the fight like that, you're in the fight. If you expand beyond the fight, if you look at self-expansion, which is what we'll go on to talk about, and you make every effort in your life to make yourself bigger, spiritually bigger, not worried about what anybody else is doing, but bless everyone, always seeing the divine in them as we're on our way to this self-expansion. It's the only way to get where we know we want to go. And everything else is a detour that's going to lead us into some blind alley. And it's true. I mean, I watch it in my own life, and I have to laugh these days, except sometimes I don't feel it's so funny, but I make myself laugh, I'll say that. You know, I'm 77 years old. It's a long time it's a moment in the life of a soul, but within a life, it's most of a life. It's a lot of years, many of them spent seeking, consciously, actively seeking. And then I watch the most simple thing get me in the form of hurting my ego or hurting my feelings. Like, it's embarrassing to be 77 and to feel like your feelings can still get hurt. What is that? Why would that ever happen? I know better, but I don't really know better. Not really, or it wouldn't happen. Why do I ever have that thought about not being good enough, or why not me, or any of those thoughts that actually still come? Only now I say to myself immediately, stop it. Master always tells us that where our consciousness is, our thoughts are at the very last moment of life, makes a huge difference. I mean, he makes it seem in his teachings that no matter how you've lived, if you can get it right in those moments when you're leaving, we make great spiritual progress. Well, when you get to be 77 and you're realizing that you could go any moment, you don't want to be having one of those thoughts. But what about me? Or why didn't they choose me? Or why are they being so mean? It's like, oh my God, it's like a 3-year-old, except it's not. But I'm just saying it honestly because I don't think I'm the only one that those things happen to. We probably all feel at times that we're being not treated well. So, bless everyone means you really have to have a certain realization of the soul's true nature to be able to do that, of truth, because you have to realize that it's always God speaking to God. Always. That's always the truth. And then he says this line, which I love, it's so meaningful. An expansion of self-identity means expanding beyond egoic identity. It's really what it means. An expansion of self-identity is a mark of prosperity. He says it really is a good indicator. Of course it is, because it's so darn hard. He says it in 3 words, an expansion of self-identity, but it's challenging. It's a mark of prosperity and also a condition for its attainment. So as we're expanding, then he says it's a mark of prosperity, meaning we're living a good life. Good means spiritually good. If we're expanding, if we're in a state of expansive consciousness, means we're prosperous in the truest sense of the word, and that we can't be prosperous until we have that. So there's so much in that expansion of self-identity. That's the whole really point of this reading, that it's the only way we can be prosperous, and we also have to start there to get prosperous. It's a beautiful, circular, all-encompassing sentence of teaching. Then, this is not here, but elsewhere, Swamiji says, according to Master's teachings, true prosperity cannot be achieved through selfishness or by diminishing others. Prosperity should evolve from self-centeredness to a service-oriented approach where one's actions are guided by the consciousness that God is the doer and all work is for him. Again, beautiful words, very, very subtle in the living of them, to always remember that God is working through us and that God is working through everyone. And so it's always God serving God, God talking to God. I mean, this is why that beautiful Hindu prayer, basically, God is mother, God is father, God is friend, guest is God, right? All of it, just going through every person that can be in relation to us or us to them, and reminding us, is that Twameva Mata? Twameva Mata, yeah. I mean, which we chant all the time, but to realize what the words mean, because unless you're grown up with it, you're not really understanding the Hindu words. But the English translation, thou art my mother, my father, thou art my brother, my friend, thou art my wisdom. I mean, it just goes on. But when you realize what you're saying you're everything. And this is what Swamiji is pointing out to us through Master's teachings here. He says the only way to be truly prosperous on the spiritual path is to remember that at all times. This perspective encourages living simply and serving one another, fostering unity rather than duality. The idea is that by focusing on unselfishness and devotion to God, one can achieve true success and prosperity, which benefits not only oneself but others, by focusing on unselfishness and devotion to God. Again, it's the truth. It's absolute truth. But given the pull to be focused on oneself, I can see why these secrets came through Swamiji the way they did. 25 books of them. Because when you first read it, you could easily say to yourself, of course, that's it. Like, what are we going to talk about for an hour? Of course. Because they feel that way. But when there's self-honesty involved, then we begin to see how much we need to keep affirming these secrets, these teachings. So I'm just picking out little pieces that I want to talk about, then we'll open it up and we'll all talk. Swamiji says, and I don't even remember where I pulled these from, but he says there's a problem with an emphasis in these days on self-esteem. And I think there has been an emphasis on that in the past 50 years, let's say, particularly, or 100 years, as psychotherapy came around so much. So that what everybody was trying to establish is good self-esteem. We would think that would be a good thing. Swamiji says, it's very interesting, I'll read it to you later, but he says, I suggest that the modern day emphasis on self-esteem be changed. He said self-respect would be a better concept because it's less susceptible to misunderstanding. And, when I read that, because it immediately feels true to me, but I thought, imagining having the mind, it's easy to think when you hear it, you go, of course that's true. But the mind, to know that, how subtle that is, saying that rather than talking about self-esteem, we should talk about self-respect. He said, the problem with self-esteem, he says, is that it blocks creativity, all of which comes to us through a divine source. But when we're talking about self-esteem, we can block that. But he said the highest kind of creativity, he says, that flows down to us from super consciousness. So again, self-esteem with a little s, he's saying blocks that because we're busy working on something that's egoically based by definition, and that it blocks that which can flow to us from that superconscious place. And then he says this line, which I love. In that context, high or low self-esteem are no different. They're not different from each other. High self-esteem or low, both of them arise from excessive ego consciousness. And it's true. I mean, again, I wouldn't have thought of it, but I love that he says that. So he's saying, let's not talk about self-esteem. Remember, all of this is on our way to looking at self-expansion. Self-expansion are the two big words here. But he says, so don't use that phrase, even self-esteem, because it's all about ego. And you can see, if you think about it in the ways that we use it or refer to people, it's contractive. It's a very contractive concept, actually. And he goes on to say, egoic self-importance, this would be so obvious, that's this we know, always disappoints. I'm just jumping around and talking a little bit, reading and talking, and then we can talk about it as a group. Swamiji says, if you equate success with happiness for yourself and others, and not with the ability to exert power over anyone, then know that self-importance, power over others, and a desire to manipulate are delusive dreams that are eventually succeeded by a rude awakening. That is so, again, I just love the way he uses words. If you equate happiness for yourself and others, if you equate success, this is it. I read this wrong. If you equate success with happiness for yourself and others, and not with the ability to exert any power over anyone, then know that self-importance, power over others, and a desire to manipulate are delusive dreams that are eventually succeeded by a rude awakening. So, again, it's cause for thought about how do we move towards feeling self-important? Or how often are we trying to exert power over others? Again, these are important because they're not obvious for us. So important to think about these. And a desire to manipulate, that's a very hard one to admit that you have. But I will tell you, just on the way in here, is that why you're smiling? No. I was just, Lakshmi and I were having a talk about something that was just, we both felt, I think I'll speak for myself, I felt was not handled well. It was a communication that came out as a kind of dictum. You know, this is what we're going to do now. And when I read it, I thought, wow, because I'm not here as much and I don't hear everything that's going on with the staff as much as I used to, I thought, was there a discussion about that? I hope there was some discussion with certain people, but I wasn't sure. But it sounded harsh, a little like unlike how we often do things. And I said to Lakshmi on the way in, and it's just, I mean, I'm embarrassed. I didn't know I would be reading this, but I said to her, you know, you have to have those discussions. And I said, then it becomes actually rather easy to help people do what you think should be done, and even to help them feel that it was their idea. I just said it to her. Now, I'm not manipulating in a bad way, but I'm aware of that power. You know, it's something that in medicine, and this is where it's such a fine line, but I would say 1,000 times in my medical career, something like that. I mean, it was a lot of years. I was being asked to help people make very, very meaningful decisions. And of course, I was always smart enough to know that any decision, you have to live with the decision you make. If you decide to disconnect somebody you love from a respirator, you have to be able to live with that. This is part of what Polika just went through. So when he called me in LA when I was down there, said, here's what's going on, what do you think? My first instinct is, well, where are you? Because he's going to have to live with his decision. He feels very good about the decision. The decisions were pretty clear-cut. I mean, Krishna even helped in many ways to be able to get there. But so those kinds of decisions are one thing. But often, surgery or not, chemo or not, this or not, that, it comes up every day, all day. And I would very often know what I thought people should do, like what would be best for them medically. It was a very well-intentioned notion. It was true. Anyway, I knew what the upsides were, what the downsides were. But to engage people in a way that they feel like they're making the decision so that they can be with it, and you're not just dictating them, oh no, you need to do this, or that, do it this way, do it that way, don't do this. So it's not always a bad thing if it's for somebody's good and you're aware of it, which I think that would have been, but still, it was interesting just having had that conversation where I just said to her, oh yeah, you need to have the conversation. Then you can always get people to do, if you have the highest interest, if it's a spiritually elevating thought or action, if you know it's for the good of the whole, one can be very persuasive to get people, get them to see the truth. It's really what it is. But it's interesting having that conversation. The way to defeat Maya's ego-narrowing argument is to remind yourself constantly that happiness and fulfillment come through self-expansion, a kind of expansion that is unattainable by the ego, but that comes inevitably to one who achieves release from the ego. So again, saying you can never get to these things through egoic means or through attachment, but as soon as you can let go of that, all of this will suddenly come to you. An expansive consciousness is the mark of a healthy ego. An unhealthy ego, this is interesting, on the contrary, is demonstrated by contractiveness. What Swamiji's pointing to here is that, the ego is not always the enemy. And this, because we need the ego, right? Master has told us the ego is the soul identified with the body. So as long as we're in this body, we actually have an ego. We have to have it, or we couldn't hold this attachment, we would die. So how do we use that ego? How do we get to be in charge rather than the ego being in charge? How do we become progressively more conscious is really what we're talking about. Swamiji says, which I think is interesting to all of this, a person with a healthy ego, is not, as some people imagine, self-assertive or aggressive. And that's important because often people equate good egoic, people who are strong with the ego, to be assertive, aggressive, those kinds of people. Swamiji is saying quite the contrary. If you have a healthy ego, he says, one with a healthy ego gazes outward in appreciation of the world around him. He seeks to understand rather than to be understood, to relate to rather than be related to. He's self-giving and empathic. He's saying it takes a strong, healthy ego. So not to confuse self-expansion doesn't mean that we're trying to rid ourselves of all of what the ego does. It's that we're trying to point the ego in the direction. So any sense of I becomes I, where is that? Is it up here? No, but it's I wish I could say it because I should know all this. Ever expanding I. There's a line in Samadhi that says that. So he's saying you start with a little me, but Master was saying in Samadhi, it's not here. But you get to that. Every line says that in some way, but there is that one line. But it's just that expansiveness from I, me, mine, to I that's in everyone, and that's considering everyone and including everyone, that this is how we expand our consciousness. And he says, I should have reversed these so I didn't wind up on a down note here. Person whose ego is unhealthy is preoccupied with himself, with his complexes, his problems, his worries. He concentrates on how others treat him, not on what he can do for them. And then, I shouldn't take time to read this, but I love this line. So this is Swamiji again. He says, he might be described as a psychological vortex. His perceptions turn inward upon himself as the focus of all interest. So he's just saying an unhealthy ego is what keeps us small, keeps us contracted, keeps us worrying about ourselves, our little self, our egoic self. But that same ego, when it becomes healthy and expansive and cares about others, can carry us on this path to self-expansion. Okay. Yeah, I just read another couple of these places where we get stuck. The way back to self-acceptance then is, this is following other things that he wrote here that I'm not going to read, but we're lost. Now we're looking to be found, is not to begin with affirmations of self-worth. Such affirmations can only force comparison with other people. I'm just as worthy as he is. I'm more worthy than he is. He's preventing me from developing my own sense of worthiness. Statements like these are typical reflections of a contracted mind. The cure lies in self-forgetfulness, not in self-affirmation. The way back to self-acceptance is first to get into an expansive mode by affirming a more generous, giving attitude towards others. Okay. It says, remember he talked about being, the secret was about the diminishment of others. He says, I took these things from another secret book, maybe Secret of Self-Acceptance or something, I don't know. But one of the secrets was not blaming others for their negative attitudes and behavior towards us. That's hard, not blaming them for their negative attitudes towards us. For in blaming them, we only weaken ourselves and give them more power to hurt us. that maybe just got my attention because I do that. It doesn't feel good when somebody has a negative attitude about me. I mean, I could see myself in that. Expanding your sense of selfhood, this is some secret of something, is expanding your sense of selfhood and including others in your greater self. View their happiness, their fulfillment, their successes as your own. Then he goes on to say, be childlike. Don't judge, accept. By blaming others, you enter a mode of self-contraction and only inflict pain on yourself. Accept others as they are. What a challenging few words. Accept life as it is. Also, a challenging few words. Sometimes we don't know that until life gets hard. We can sit around and say, oh yeah, I'm ready to accept everything. And then it comes and it's hard. By learning acceptance, you will learn above all to accept yourself. With acceptance will come forgiveness and a joyful sense of inner release. But when he says that, first he says, by learning acceptance, you'll learn above all to accept yourself. And then he says, with that acceptance of self, he's referring back to, not about other people, will come forgiveness of ourselves, right? And a joyful sense of inner release. Okay. So I'm just going to read this one last line here, and then I'm going to stop. I wanted to make sure it was true before that I didn't have one other thing I wanted to say, but I don't. The self-expansion towards which all life aspires is of the spirit, an expansion of sympathy, of love, of the awareness that comes from sensing God's presence everywhere. Most understand intuitively that they are more than they seem. They feel a certain greatness within them that is not defined by their humanity. People know on some inner level of consciousness that there is a greater reality to which we all belong. That's another really, I found that very reassuring, actually, when I read that. I mean, I don't know why exactly, but I thought, because I think it speaks to an intuition that's not born of an egoic self at all, that really we all know, and what's driving us, no matter how deeply it's hidden within us, is that we are made of greatness. It's not an egoic greatness. That's a good statement to make, not a bad statement. That there's something greater than what we look like in our human form. And we know that. This was Master saying this, but that someplace within each of us, we know that. We sense that. So that is constantly what's driving us. At its essence, I mean, you've heard Master say even people in the mafia who kill, they kill because they think they're going to be happier, greater, more. Whatever is driving everything, thank God we're all beyond that, but we've been there and done that. And so anyway, I found a lot of peace in that line. Just going to see if I can find it again for a moment. There's a lot of other great lines here that I pulled out, but I can't read them now. Yeah. Most understand intuitively that they are more than they seem. So we're talking about self-expansion. I mean, just to keep bringing it back. And he's saying, you already have this within you. You know it. He said they feel a certain greatness within them that is not defined by their humanity. People know on some inner level of consciousness that there is a greater reality to which we all belong. You know, I just shared something about myself and then open it up. I mean, we have plenty of time for discussion. Because I keep bringing this up because it's what's happening for me and because my style of speaking has always been to tell tales on myself. But I'm going through this, what feels like a monumental shift in life. It does. It just feels like all of what I've been doing for 77 years, which has been a huge outward expression of seva. Huge. I mean, from the time I was a little girl, and then from the time I got a little older, I became a nurse, you serve people. I became a doctor, you serve people. I became a minister, you serve people. A light bearer, a spiritual director. It's been such a deep karmic thing for me, but I was always helped to do it. And now I feel like on a dime, that's how it feels, I'm being called to go inward much more. And that feels wonderful to me. I mean, I just had an argument with Master this morning, or I would say a discussion, because I'm definitely moving there, and I feel these, I hope you can, I'm telling you this story so you can find your own stories, not because, you know, not on some soap opera needing to talk here, but, or whatever those TV shows are called in the afternoon, not soap operas. You know, those talk shows where people reveal everything horrible about their lives. But anyway, it's exactly what I want to be doing. It came to me, I know it. It's like, wow, days sitting at home, meditating, just opening up to feel God's wisdom and guidance and energetically sharing that with everybody just feels so perfect to me. So 2 things. Number 1, I had to have this talk with Master, saying to him, don't you dare get me set up to be able to be sitting in my house quietly and then have me leave my body right away. You better give me at least a year or 2 of being able to feel that. I mean, I'm so looking forward to it. And it comes with a letting go. You know, it's like what I've always thought trapeze artists must feel. They have to let go of the trapeze. And there's a moment where you could fall. I mean, if you don't get the other trapeze, I've always watched them and I've thought about that. It's just a moment of, you know, we've learned a lot. There's a lot of skill. We know how to live life. But it's a big moment when you're not holding on to anything. So I'm living through that right now. Of suddenly that, wait a minute, where's my self-worth? What am I doing if I'm not out there doing that? It's a strange feeling. It's like, you know, you feel like those moments where the ego has you by the Satan has you by your feet and he's holding on to you and you want to soar and you're being helped to soar. But somebody's really got a hold of you and it's holding you down. The somebody, of course, is myself, but who's looking at that? Anyway, I'm saying it because these teachings, they're not just like, oh, yes, I know that. Oh, or oh, of course. They're with us to the very last breath. And it's only in that last breath that we can, till we come back as an avatar. But even for Swamiji, Master said to him, you'll be free at the moment of your death. He wasn't totally free in life. And he had to go through a lot physically, a lot emotionally, a lot of trauma, we would use these words. He handled it the way a great saint would. Embarrassment, he was slandered, constantly throughout his life. So there's always that, could you get caught? Could you get caught? For most of us, we will still get caught. And it's just fascinated me today to read what's between me and that. And it's really good to get a good look at it and to be honest about it. That's where we want to be, but not so easy. Okay, who else is going to tell on themselves today? No, I'm teasing. I mean, thoughts, questions, anything.
I'll share something, I guess. I think, I was thinking about it, even just the subtlety of, that idea of self-expansion and the contradiction that's sort of inherent in it, because our little egoic mind, or the little human mind, when we think about expansion, I was thinking about the kind of the semantical play of diminishment, which I like that word as well. We don't hear it very often in self-expansion, and we tend to think that as we get bigger, inherently everything and everyone else is getting smaller around us, and so even just that visual of what true self-expansion looks like, it's, self-expansion from the soul is such an inclusive experience that there is no, just even, like I said, I was just kind of visualizing the self-expanding and then everything else around you diminishing and getting smaller and smaller. Sorry, I'll hold it lower. Hold it lower.
Higher.
But then when you hear over and over again all of these definitions of what true success looks like, and true prosperity, and how to just let go of the ego, that's what we heard over and over again, are just the subtleties of letting go of the ego, and I was becoming aware of what an inclusive experience this was, or this is, and this is not necessarily, it's not as profound as your story, but just the other day I was talking with somebody, and they made a very small minor mistake. They were asking for help and they couldn't figure something out, and it's something they've done 500 times probably, and but they couldn't figure it out. And so I walked over and was like, oh, flip the switch to on, whatever, something simple like that. And I was just sort of explaining, this is what the part that you were missing, and they got so snappy with me. I know, because it's embarrassing and it's like bashful. I'm sure there were so many emotions going on inside of her head when she was going through it, and I was so quick.
Was it me?
No.
It was me at the beginning of class.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, it happened there too. Apparently it's happening a lot for me.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was joking.
But even just that, that experience, it's so, I was watching myself, because as Shanti knows, I've been watching this kind of this quickness toward feistiness that I've been experiencing lately, and I was so quick to want to just get big back. Like, oh, you want to push, I'll push you back, and then I just sat and stopped and was reflecting on it all day long, and just realizing all of the emotions that she must have been going through and what caused that reaction. And of course, in that sense of self-expansion, the whole concept of diminishment simply disappears, because then there's empathy, there's compassion, there's willingness to understand each other. There's, and it doesn't matter if it's tiny or if it's huge, whatever it may be. It's just it was just a subtle play of kind of bringing in that imagery of what felt to me at first was so like teeny diminishment and big, but it's not. It's just so subtle, and there's almost no image. I was trying to find a metaphor to end this with that would close it out and make it clear, but just that subtlety of how diminishment actually disappears in the face of self-expansion.
Yeah.
So
That's a very wise and subtle and wise, I put it in that order, awareness, what you're saying. And I didn't read a lot of that, but it's so in here that there's a line that we cross, a place that we get to. It's not like we cross it in our human condition and don't come back. But when we get there, it's so perfectly obvious and fulfilling and devoid of any angst at all, which I think it's what you're saying, isn't it? It's just like you're either in the egoic side of it, pushing back, feeling useless or worthless, or wait a minute, what am I going to be? Who am I? Kind of thing. Or you're just free. You're just free. And I think it's so important. I mean, I've been going through this for, I would say, weeks now, at least sometime each day, because the ego jumps in. But as soon as I get myself back into, they are telling you, this is what's next for you. This is what you want. Why are you suddenly like going, but no, and I keep bringing myself back in that moment. Well, very much like what I just read. There's so much joy. It's perfect freedom. And it can be in a moment like what you're describing, or many moments, and I imagine then eventually we get to the place where from joy I came, for joy I live, and sacred joy I meld. It's all the time. But I think it's really important to notice when we have those experiences, because it begins to become familiar, that place of freedom. Because even in this life, I would venture to say, for at least many of us in this room, we've lived where there were many less moments of that kind of conscious freedom I'm talking about. Not are you a good person or a bad person? Have you done good deeds? Because we're all good people here. That's how we get the privilege of sitting here. But progressively more, it's like the dots start coalescing, and then that becomes more our experience. So it's so important to rest in it for a moment, to see it and to feel the whole heart. I don't mean our human heart. The whole heart chakra opens in that moment. And it can go by, well, either you ruin it by being reactive, or, really, not you.
I know how to do that.
We all do, believe me. You don't have a corner on that market, even if you've been particularly good at it recently. But, just to say this is, trying to capture these teachings. It's like trying to hold an exquisitely beautiful bubble. That's what it feels like to me. It's so beautiful when you go to touch it. If you don't do it just right, of course you burst it, and then you don't have that beauty anymore. But to at least notice it, appreciate it, feel it, this is it. Then we can it's easier to keep coming back to it, Like so many experiences in life. You get up on water skis. The first time you get up, it's much easier to get up the next time. You might still have trouble staying up, and so many things are like that, but that's what this is. But it is exquisitely subtle. I really appreciate what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm not really sure where to start, because everything you all are saying, it's like, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, I can relate to that. Oh, I can relate to that. So I think I'll start with, since I've been in Palo Alto, I've had the opportunity to do exactly what it is that you're moving towards. And that's just spend a lot of time in meditation and inside and do this and do that. And it was resisted. I mean, I still had in my mind all these things that I wanted to do and accomplish, and because I felt like my time on this path was just now becoming wise, where I could contribute. And all of a sudden, my health started having problems. My eyesight started going. Just my money started disappearing. And so we're talking about prosperity, and all of this time serious, severe issues
Mm.
to where it's sitting over at Kevin's Auto right now, and they have no clue what the problem is. Well, they do have a clue, and it's not good news. And like, all right, so my attitude was, all right, and I texted my mom, I said, God's up to something, and I have no idea what. We shall see. And I'm just, and maybe part of it, and this is going to sound weird to most people, but not to Ananda people, is that part of the joy that I'm feeling has to do with Krishna's passing. Because since I experienced her generosity and her kindness and all of that, her energy is floating around all of us right now, because she's not in her body anymore. And seeing that astral ascension ceremony, it just added to it, and just all of that's what the true prosperity is. Okay? I don't know where the money's going to come from to fix the car, or even if the car's going to be able to be fixed. I don't know if, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to go back to Texas right now. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm happier than I've ever been.
Good for you. That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
I was thinking in the back, it's a little bit along the lines, Lakshmi, of what you were saying, but I use different words, that it's almost like there's the thoughts, the emotions that are of diminishment. I can't have that and the self-expansion. It's one or the other. If I'm in the self-expansion, I can't be in those thoughts of diminishment. It's one or the other. It's almost like there's no neutral ground.
Nope.
And I've been catching myself with this, not the diminishment of others, but the diminishment of self, in the sense of, well, I could be doing that, and then it's like, I should be doing that. It's like, well, is Master telling you to do that? No. And what I have found so helpful to make that switch, as you said, is the phrase, so what? It's actually really helpful to let that go. And it's like, and come back to, well, what is it that Master does want me to do? That it's when I phrase it that way of, well, so what?
Yeah.
Then that just sort of levels the playing field to then flip the switch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are such beautiful thoughts to share, all of it, because, you know, we're in such a minority in the world. I mean, and we're really seeing it clearly right now, such a particular moment, but that ability to really get there and feel freed by it. You know, the things that we're discussing here, very few people. I mean, most of the people in my world who I love dearly, they would have no idea what I'm talking about. None. It's interesting. I mean, what we're talking about. But that constantly coming back to, and so those two words, or your two words, or whatever I've been using, but let's say so what, because it's really true. It just separates the ego from the divine call, you know, because the ego wants to look like, and everybody has their story, but the divine call is so other than that. It's only what we can hear from our guru, really. Nothing else would matter, nothing. So, I mean, I don't want to be too revealing about my own struggle with it, but when it comes up, and I just say to myself, what if you never get to have that in this life? And then I could say, so what? I mean, the truth is, it's not even really what I think is so important or what I want. That's the thing. You're just in it before. It's like, no, I actually really want to be serving now. by meditating so deeply that all of Ananda can feel it and be influenced by it. I do. I want to go to that place that I was told to go. Just be there. Be there. That this is a path of energy. Trust that. But I have to keep saying, it keeps coming up. So what? So what? No, you don't need that.
Part of where it gets tricky is the path of energy requires a strong will.
It does. That's exactly.
And that's where it can
Yeah.
get tricky.
It does. Yeah, I mean, didn't Master Swamiji, and I don't want to look back at these papers, yeah, when he was saying about self-effort or one of those self things, I'm confused now, but it's like, boy, if you start going that way to find freedom, there's too many tricky spots. Just like what you're saying, we have to have all of that self-effort and keep it headed in the right direction. Yeah, I agree.
This is just a silly metaphor or story, but I remember Joe just sharing it. I don't know if Swami said it or if Joe just created it, but he talks about it in that way that if you're going to get a job done, let's say that you're hanging a picture on the wall, if you need a hammer, only a hammer's going to get the job done, and if you need a screwdriver, only the screwdriver is going to get the job done, and if you need a screwdriver and you're trying to use a hammer, you're never going to get there. And it's just as you guys were talking and sharing your story earlier, and your story that you're sharing there, it just popped back into my head. And, I thought, well, but it feels so humanly natural and, of course, so obvious. If the hammer's the one that's needed, we all want to be the hammer. Like, why don't I get to be the hammer now? Or I can do the job just as well, exactly as you're saying, but then you stop and think each thing is so unique because it has a specific role. And exactly what you're saying, let's really use this metaphor in the toolbox of life. If we're all actually doing the job that we're being asked to do, that it's our dharma to step up and do, then everything works harmoniously and the home gets built or whatever it may be. But it's so simple, that's what we do. Either we're a hammer and we're sitting there trying to, bang everything around, or, we're always just a little, anyway.
It's a beautiful image and analogy. It's why in medicine you have to be very careful when you go to seek a specialist's opinion. Because if you see a cardiologist, they think it's your heart. You can, the next day, go to an endocrinologist, they think you have to. So when you're the primary care doctor, you have to say, wait a minute, I'll take that in. So if you're a hammer, you just want to pound everything. It's really, I love it, actually. It makes all of our issues seem so silly in a way. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, that is because of our energy here. The vibration is pure and so relaxing. Because when we enter into somewhere where egos are in the development, all of us are, but in different stages, then we feel the constriction. I was just trying to say that all of these is a workshop of ego. First we are very contracted, then a little bit less because we are hammered periodically. And then it reduces, and then the grace sets in, then the ego welcomes the grace. And at some point the ego releases its hold and the grace sets in. But we are in between somewhere, so we are getting the hammer.
These are good examples, though. Thank you. It's a good discussion. So, all right, friends. Glad you're all here. And turns out it's not just fun, but meaningful and important. So that's good. I think I will say no more classes now until January. It feels sort of not self-defeating as in me, but for the purpose of the whole class. It's just meant to be engaged in by more people, I think. So let's wait till after the holidays and we'll pick up with number 19. We are going to finish the book, no matter what. I don't care if it's two of us sitting here, we're going to finish this book. I want to. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, but yeah.
We got 23 more, so we can just keep going.
23 more books.
Books, yeah.
I know. There was another one of the books that popped into mind today, and I was remembering a conversation I had with Asha when I was doing Secrets. We were Secrets of Emotional Healing, which was just thrilling somehow. It was during the pandemic. It was, I think 75 people signed up for the class, and 75 people came, almost all of it. It was really, it was a thrilling class. That book is amazing. And Asha said to me, you know, I'm thinking to do, maybe go through a lot of the secrets. Do you think you're going to do any more? And I said, no, I don't think I'll do any more. Then I started doing this one. Now I'm thinking I'd love to do another one. It's just like talking about the essence of spiritual teaching, the essence of a spiritual path. Doesn't matter exactly which path anybody's on. These are spiritually universal truths. So, yeah, maybe we'll do it.
Just I was trying to say that whatever you teach that sets the vibration and contributes to the vibration. All of us came here to hold some level of vibration. That's what we are doing. It doesn't matter really that in your class 1 person come or 100% come, but the vibration will still be held.
That's important. Thank you for saying that. It's true. I think more floats through me if this is a critical mass to me. This is fine. And it depends on who the people are, but to put 6 people in a room who are very present makes it very easy. And this will live forever somewhere in the Ananda world, but also the vibrations out. I really appreciate your saying that. It's actually very important. So.
It happened so.
It's him. You're good.
Good. Once in Calcutta, Swami was scheduled to give a class.
Yeah.
It was auditorium was booked. 1,300 people can sit there, but he couldn't come. He went to Bombay to the film was in process that time. So Asha came. She spoke. There was only 13 people sitting in that auditorium. That day I was there.
In Calcutta?
In Calcutta, I couldn't believe this. In Calcutta is one of the cities in the world that people listens to everything, appreciates everything. It's just a lot of intellectual people. But there, to listen to Asha, only 13 people came. So it doesn't matter really much. That class was still captured in the internet and people will see.
Yeah. And as you say, the energy is going out anywhere. Thank you for saying that. It's important to remember. Yeah. Okay, great.